There is
How
a
could you do this
particular
to our
kind of
family after
evening that
everything
only
we've done for
happens a
you?
few
You
times
should
in a
leave now.
lifetime. The candles are perfect. The wine is poured, and two people are finally sitting across from each other the way couples sit when they've stopped performing, love, and simply feel it. Her name is Zara Mitchell. His name is Kai Sion. High above New York City, in a penthouse with floor-to-ceiling windows, they were celebrating the biggest deal of the year. And what made it close wasn't his instincts. It wasn't his family name. It was her knowledge of zoning law, her relationships across 3 counties, her sharp eye catching a compliance clause that would have cost this family hundreds of thousands of dollars. He raised his glass quietly. No announcement, no performance. "To us," he said. "To us," she smiled. In 47 seconds, that door was going to open. No knock, no call ahead, just heels on marble. And the silence that rushes into a room when someone arrives determined to fill all of it. She heard her before she saw her. That is the thing about Mrs. Sion. She carries a perfume, expensive, unmistakable, that arrives on its own breath before she does, and then the heels. 2 sharp strikes on marble, unhurried, deliberate, the walk of a woman who has never once needed to announce herself, because every room she entered already knew to make space. Kai's jaw set, just slightly, just enough. Zara noticed. She always noticed. 3 years of marriage into this family had taught her that the smallest shifts in her husband's face carried more information than most people's full sentences. What his face said in that half-second before the door swung open was this: "Brace yourself." Mrs. Sion entered the way she always entered, as though the room had been quietly waiting and could now finally begin. She swept past, Zara, the way you move past furniture you stopped noticing long ago. Crossed directly to her son, spoke to him first in Korean. She always did, a quiet, practiced way of drawing a line around who belonged in the conversation and who was simply present in the room. Then she shifted to English. "I heard the deal closed. Why didn't you call me? This is family business. I helped your father build everything we have from nothing, Kai, from nothing." Kai set his glass down slowly. It was time-sensitive. Zara's work on the compliance side made it possible. Her community relationships sealed it. It protects everything we've built. Silence. And in that silence, Zara spoke, calmly, factually, without ego, without performance. "We worked on this together. The compliance clause alone would have saved this family hundreds of thousands in legal complications. It's good for everyone." She wasn't asking for credit. She was simply telling the truth. Mrs. Sion turned slowly, like a door swinging on a hinge oiled just enough to move without sound. For the first time since walking through that door, she looked directly at Zara. And when she spoke, it was almost conversational, almost gentle, which made it the most cutting thing she could have said. "You have no say." 4 words. Zara's shoulders dropped just a fraction before her body had time to decide not to let it. Kai saw it. He felt it the way a wrong note feels in a quiet room, not loud, but impossible to unhear. And Kai Sion, a man who had built his entire reputation on knowing exactly when to speak and when not to, made his choice. He said his mother's name, softly. He said it was late. He said they'd talk business tomorrow. He did not say, "That is my wife." He did not say, "You will not speak to her that way in this house." He said just enough to move her toward the door. And Zara, who read contracts for a living, who caught the clauses other people skipped past, who understood that what is left out of an agreement matters as much as what is written in, heard every word he didn't say. The days after were quiet in the wrong way, not the quiet of a home at rest. The quiet of a draft you can't locate, present everywhere, coming from nowhere, impossible to seal out no matter how many doors you close. They were still kind to each other, still ate breakfast together, still talked about work, but something had shifted in the texture of everyday life. The way Zara paused now, briefly, before speaking in rooms where Mrs. Sion had recently been, as though she was taking quiet inventory of how much space she was allowed to occupy. The way her work files were now organized on a separate hard drive, hers alone. 3 years of small adjustments. 3 years of recalibrating. The kind of erosion that happens so gradually the person experiencing it doesn't notice, until one evening at a candlelit table, they feel it all at once. Meanwhile, across the city, Zara was on a call. A county compliance officer in New Jersey, walking him through a zoning reclassification issue the Sion family had been stuck on for 8 months. Her voice was calm, precise. She referenced 3 subsections of municipal code from memory. The way someone references directions to a place they've driven 100 times, the officer paused. "You know, I hadn't looked at it that way." She thanked him, made a note, and moved to the next file. No audience, no recognition. No one in the room to see it. This is the woman Mrs. Sion dismisses without a second thought. Some ironies are too complete to require explanation. That night, Kai came home late. The apartment was still. On the coffee table, open where she'd left it, was a contract she'd been working through before exhaustion won. He picked it up. Read the top page. Her notes were in the margins. Neat, thorough, written in the careful hand of someone who understands that the details other people skim are usually the ones that matter most. He set it down, opened his phone, pulled up the credit sheet he'd filed with the partners the day the deal closed. He read it. Her name was not on it. He was the one who filed it. Built the document from habit, the way you build anything from habit without stopping to examine the shape of what you're making. He hadn't thought about it. That was the truth of it. He simply hadn't thought. He stood in the dark of his own living room for a long time, the contract open on the table, her handwriting in the margins, her name nowhere on the page that went out to the partners. Some things don't need a voice. Some things just need to be stood in front of in the dark until the full weight of them finally lands. It began the way most things that change everything begin, quietly, on an ordinary Tuesday morning. Good coffee going cold on the desk, a to-do list with nothing dramatic on it. Zara was organizing shared business files, the digital equivalent of straightening a house before guests arrive. She was not looking for anything. That is the thing about discoveries that rearrange your life. They almost never happen when you're searching. She clicked open a misfiled thread, business correspondence, 3 years old, pre-wedding. Mrs. Sion writing to a longtime family advisor. Zara read the first message. It was exactly what she would have expected. The business case for the marriage laid out with precision, Zara's American market knowledge, her community relationships, the regulatory advantages, the legitimacy she'd bring to the Sion family's real estate expansion. sensible on every side. Zara read it and felt nothing she didn't already know. She had always understood the arrangement, had signed the contract with her eyes open, read it 3 times, caught a clause. She'd never been naive about what this started as. She scrolled down. There was a second message. This is the part of the story where everything that felt like coincidence stops being coincidence. The second message was longer. Mrs. Sion was no longer talking about the business. She was talking about her son. She wrote about watching Kai for 2 years before the arrangement was made, watching him build a life that required her input less and less, making decisions without her, moving in directions she hadn't pointed him toward. She wrote that she had begun to understand, with a clarity that frightened her, that if she didn't act, she was going to lose him, not to another woman, to independence, to a life where she was no longer the center of it. So she found a solution, a wife who came with obligation, with a family that needed the Sions far more than the Sions needed them, a wife who would be grateful enough. Those were the words she used, grateful enough to stay in her lane, a wife who would keep Kai close to the family world, which meant close to Mrs. Sion. The business case was real, but it was the wrapping, not the gift. The marriage was designed to keep her son from leaving, and Zara was chosen to be the rope. She read it twice, closed the laptop, folded her hands on the desk, the way she folds them when she is working through a problem that requires more patience than emotion, and sat. No gasping, no tears, no dramatic collapse, just a woman sitting very still in a quiet room, looking at nothing, while 3 years of small moments rearranged themselves into a pattern she could now see completely. She thought about the compliance clause, the one she caught before anyone else thought to look. She thought about the partner meetings where her ideas were talked around, until Kai said the same things a week later and the room nodded. She thought about the credit sheet, her name not on it. She thought about every moment in 3 years when she had quietly wondered, am I a partner or a placeholder? And then she thought about that phrase, grateful enough to stay in her lane. The gap between who Zara actually was and who Mrs. Sion needed her to be was enormous. And the thing about seeing a gap that large, that clearly, you cannot unsee it. She opened a new document, not a confrontation, not a letter, nothing she planned to hand to anyone else. She made notes the way she always made notes when she needed to think clearly. This information belonged to her first. She was going to decide what it meant before she handed it to anyone else to carry. She didn't say a word to her husband. Not yet. I want to ask you something before we go any further. If you found something like that buried in an ordinary file on a Tuesday morning, would you call him immediately? Or would you sit with it first? Would you need to understand it fully in your own hands before you let someone else's reaction shape what it means to you? Drop your answer in the comments, because there is no wrong answer, only an honest one. Kai Hong has a particular skill, not the one most people assume, not the ability to hold a room simply by walking into it. The deeper skill, the one that actually built the Sion name over 30 years, is pattern recognition. The ability to feel when something is wrong before it has a name. He felt it on a Wednesday. A longtime business partner responded to a routine update with a question that was slightly too careful. A pause that lasted a beat too long. He noted it, filed it, said nothing. By Thursday, a second data point. Another partner, previously enthusiastic, was requesting additional sign-off on a decision Zara had already reviewed and cleared. Then one of them said it, almost casually. "I heard she tends to overcomplicate negotiations, that she can slow things down." Kai looked at him. "Where did you hear that?" The partner shifted. "You know how it is." Kai nodded slowly, changed the subject, said nothing further, because the most important information is rarely found in the conversation you're having. It's found in the one happening just behind it. He knew it wasn't true. Zara didn't overcomplicate negotiations. She clarified them. Anyone who had sat across a table from her understood that within 20 minutes. He also knew, with the certainty of a man who has spent his adult life understanding how influence moves through a network, exactly where things like this start. They start with a phone call. Quiet, friendly, framed as concern. The kind of call that plants a seed so small the person receiving it doesn't realize they've been planted in. He pulled the thread, over 2 days, between meetings, without announcement, without urgency. What he found were his mother's fingerprints, not her voice, not a direct confrontation. She was far too precise for that, just the particular pattern of small doubts carefully placed in conversations she had no business being part of. Erosion, not explosion. The way water gets into a foundation, not through force, but through patience and repetition. He sat with that for a full day. Meanwhile, across the city, in a conference room she had booked herself, without telling Kai, without asking for his presence or his permission, Zara was sitting across from the most skeptical of those partners. She had called him directly, introduced herself not as Kai Sion's wife, but as the compliance lead on the family's last 4 acquisitions. She asked for 20 minutes. He gave her 20. She walked him through 3 months of compliance work, methodically, specifically. The way someone walks you through something when they know every inch of it and have nothing to prove and everything to show. By minute 18, the skepticism in the room was gone. By minute 20, he was asking her questions. She answered them, thanked him for his time, picked up her bag, and left. She did not call Kai to report what she had done, not to hide it. Simply because it hadn't occurred to her that she needed to. Kai heard about the meeting from the partner himself. The man's tone had changed so completely that for a moment, Kai simply listened, making sure he was hearing it right. "Your wife came in, walked me through the full compliance picture. The Jersey market analysis alone was worth the conversation." A pause. "She's good, Kai." "She is," Kai said. "She's better than good." Another pause, shorter, heavier. "Why isn't her name on the credit sheet from the last deal?" Kai had no answer, not because he didn't understand the question, but because the only honest answer was one he wasn't quite ready to say out loud yet. The negotiation takes place in a conference room on the 14th floor. Clean lines, floor-to-ceiling windows, neutral corporate space. Zara doesn't flinch. She built this meeting. She knows every person at the table. Then Mrs. Sion speaks over her. Mid-sentence. Redirecting toward Kai as though Zara had simply paused for air. Zara stops. Waits. Lets it pass like you let a truck pass on a narrow road, and then continues. It happens a second time. She pauses, shorter, continues. The third time Mrs. Sion begins to speak over her, Zara does not pause. She simply keeps going. Same pace, same tone, Same steady, unbroken thread of authority, as though the interruption were a brief weather event she had assessed, found irrelevant, and chosen not to acknowledge. The partners notice. They follow her lead, because that is what happens in a room when one person refuses to cede the floor not through force, not through volume, but through the simple, unshakable act of continuing. The room finds its center, and its center is Zara. Mrs. Sion goes still, the particular stillness of a woman who has just encountered a wall where she expected a door. Afterward, in the hallway, Kai finds Zara alone. He starts to speak. Something forming at the edges of his expression, an explanation, maybe an apology. She puts her hand on his arm, gently, without heat. I know what you're doing. I know you're trying to manage it. I need you to understand, managing it is the same as letting it happen. She doesn't wait for his answer. She goes back inside. 12 words. No slammed door, no ultimatum, no raised voice. Just the truth, said clearly, and then walked away. Kai stood in that hallway alone. 12 words that had just rearranged something inside him. Have you ever said the quiet part out loud to someone who wasn't ready to hear it? Not with anger, just the truth, clearly, and then walked away? Drop a comment. Did she say too much or not enough? Because Kai Sion now has 48 hours before this story goes somewhere none of them planned. Kai called his mother on a Thursday morning. His voice was warm, unhurried. Dinner at the penthouse Sunday evening. Business to discuss. Things worth talking through face to face. She agreed. The people who know him well can hear the difference between his warm voice and his immovable voice. Mrs. Sion did not hear it. The dinner begins civilly. Too civilly. Mrs. Sion, sensing subtly different ground, unable to name why, is watchful the way careful people are watchful when a familiar room feels rearranged. Zara says little. Her composure is not the composure of someone holding back. It is the composure of someone who already knows what this evening is. Then, midway through the meal, Mrs. Sion begins discussing the negotiation Zara led, past tense, directed entirely at Kai, as though the woman who built it from the ground up is not sitting 2 feet away. Zara sets her fork down, quietly. I led that negotiation, Mrs. Sion. I'd be glad to walk you through it. Mrs. Sion looks at her. I wasn't speaking to you. I know, Zara says, but you were speaking about my work. The table goes quiet. Mrs. Sion turns to Kai, the place she has always turned when she needs something redirected, the place that has never failed her. You see, she doesn't understand how this family. Stop. One word, no rise in his voice, no heat, just the word placed on the table like something that is not moving again. Kai stood up slowly. In the Sion world, slowness is never hesitation. It is intention, and every person in that room felt the difference. What followed was not a speech, it was accounting. He named what Zara had done, the compliance clause, the community relationships, the negotiation she built alone that closed because of her and no one else. He named what he had failed to do, the credit sheet filed without her name. The silence held too long at a candle-lit table, the managing that was really just the easier choice paid for by someone else. Then his voice dropped lower. I know about the emails, written 4 months before our wedding. I know about the calls to the partners, the doubts planted, one quiet conversation at a time. A pause. I know what this marriage was designed to be, and I know who designed it. Mrs. Sion's face went very still. 2 men appeared at the doorway, quiet, professional, not aggressive, simply present, an unmistakable statement about whose home this was and who decided what happened inside it. Mrs. Sion looked at her son for a long moment. Then, for the first time in 3 years, she looked at Zara. Not with hardness, with something far more complicated. The look of a woman who has just heard the full truth about herself and recognizes it, even as everything in her wants not to. She picked up her bag, straightened her jacket, and walked out. No scene, no shouting, just heels on marble growing quieter. And then a door. The penthouse was very still. Zara looked at him, not with relief, not with triumph. With the expression of a person watching someone choose them completely, without hesitation, for the first time. "You knew," she said. "I needed the whole picture before I moved," he said. "I'm sorry it took me this long." She looked at him. "Don't apologize, just don't wait that long again." He knew the whole time. Every thread pulled, every call log reviewed, every piece in place before he arranged that dinner. Is that the wisdom of a man who needed to be certain before he moved? Or is that a man who waited one chapter too long while his wife quietly paid the cost of his patience? Drop your answer in the comments, because there is no easy answer, only an honest one. The penthouse was quiet when morning came, not the wrong kind of quiet, the quiet of a house where something heavy had finally been set down. Kai was up before the light fully came, made coffee, stood at the windows, the city still gray and unhurried below him. Then he called his mother, not to walk anything back. He called because she was still his mother, and because love and accountability, as everywhere else, have never been opposites. She answered on the third ring. He didn't ease into it. Her apartment, hers, her financial security, unchanged. Her place in this family she helped build, not in question, but uninvited access to the penthouse over. The backdoor calls, the planted doubts, the influence run through side doors instead of the front over. If she wanted a real relationship going forward, it would be built on actual respect, not the performance of it. He offered a neutral advisor, someone neither of them had chosen. He said all of this without raising his voice, without cruelty, and without the satisfaction that lesser men might have allowed themselves after the night before. Mrs. Sion listened, said nothing immediately, and in the silence on the other end of the line, Kai simply waited. The patience of a man who had already done what needed to be done and was giving someone he loved the time to find their footing. Across the city, at almost the same hour, Zara was sitting across from that same skeptical partner. He had reached out to her directly, not to Kai, not through the usual channels, to her. The meeting lasted 40 minutes. She answered everything directly, without hedging, without softening expertise to make it feel less intimidating. An hour after she left, a message came through. 4 sentences ending with, "Looking forward to working more closely going forward." From this particular man, the equivalent of a standing ovation. Zara read it, set her phone face down, and got back to work. No call to Kai to report it. Just a woman who already knew the work was good, receiving confirmation of a thing she had never doubted, and moving on to the next task. Change rarely arrives the way we expect it to. It was a Tuesday. A phone call. Mrs. Sion calling about a lease contract with a clause she wanted to understand before she signed. Her voice was composed, but something was absent from it. The armor. She asked her question directly. No preamble, no softening, but no edge either. Just a woman who needed an answer and had decided, for reasons she kept to herself, to ask the person most qualified to give it. Zara answered thoroughly. Then flagged a second clause because leaving it unmentioned would have been a disservice. Mrs. Sion was quiet for a moment. I see, thank you. 11 minutes total. The conversation did not become warm, but it was honest. And honest was further than they had ever been, a week later, a Sunday morning. Zara was in the kitchen, coffee on, the city slower than usual below the windows. Then a knock, not heels on marble, a knock, deliberate, 2 beats. The sound of someone standing on the other side of a door they had previously never felt the need to acknowledge. Zara opened it. Mrs. Sion was standing in the hallway, dressed simply. Not the sharp, occasion-ready presentation she brought to every room she had ever decided to own. Just a woman holding a covered dish with both hands. The kind of careful grip that means the contents are still warm. It was a dish she used to make for Kai when he was young. The smell of it reached the doorway before either of them spoke. They looked at each other. In the particular quality of Mrs. Sion's stillness, in the way she held that dish just slightly tighter than necessary, Zara saw something she had never seen on this woman's face before. Uncertainty. Mrs. Sion spoke carefully. The voice of someone choosing words the way you choose your footing on unfamiliar ground. I think I have been afraid of losing him. I'm not sure I know how to stop being afraid. But I think I have been taking that out on the wrong person. The hallway was very quiet. It was not a full apology. It did not name every specific moment, but it was the beginning of one. And that is exactly what first steps look like when people are actually taking them. Not complete, not perfectly formed, just real, said out loud, to the right person. Zara looked at her for a moment, then she opened the door wider. Come in. The food smells good. 6 weeks later. 3 deals closing ahead of schedule. Partners who had been skeptical now leaning in. And on every credit sheet, every single one, Zara's name is where it belongs. Not as a courtesy, not as an afterthought, as a matter of record. Because the work was hers. And the record now reflects it. That is what changes. When a woman is finally allowed to take up the space she was always qualified for, the work doesn't change. The work was always there, always good. Always making the difference it was making. What changes is the room's ability to see it. A woman who arrived in this family as a transaction became its quiet foundation. And it took a knock. One small, uncertain knock on a Sunday morning. For the door to finally open the way it should have from the very beginning. If you stayed through all of it, through every silence, every hesitation, every choice made and unmade, I want to hear from you. Was it the mother who needed to change? The man who should have spoken sooner? Or both? Drop a comment. Tell me what you think. And if you believe she deserved better from the very beginning, hit that like button. Because she did. She knew it. And she stayed anyway. Not because she had no choice. Because she had looked at this man carefully and decided he was worth the wait. She was right. Subscribe to Black Diamonds because the next story begins exactly where this one ends.